The night my sister stole my husband, I stood outside my own bedroom door, listening to the sound of betrayal breathing on the other side. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't burst in. I just stood there, frozen, as the two people I trusted most in this world whispered to each other like lovers who had been keeping a secret for far too long. That night changed everything. My name is Lauren Whitmore, and for years I believed family was the safest place on earth. I believed loyalty was unbreakable. I believed love meant protection. I was wrong about all of it. Growing up, my sister Madeline was always the favorite. She had the confidence, the beauty, the loud laugh that filled every room. My parents adored her. Teachers admired her. Strangers noticed her. I was the quieter sister, the responsible one, the one who stayed out of trouble. Madeline got attention. I got expectations. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" my mother used to say. "Madeline has star quality," my father would add. I learned early that love in our family often came with comparisons. Still, I loved my sister. I defended her. I admired her. I trusted her. When I met Ethan Ross, I thought I had finally found something that was mine alone. Ethan was charming in a grounded way, steady, ambitious, dependable. He made me feel seen, heard, valued. After years of living in my sister's shadow, that meant everything. We dated for 3 years. We married in a small but beautiful ceremony. We bought a cozy suburban home with a front porch and a backyard garden. For the first time in my life, I felt secure, until Madeline started visiting more often. At first, it felt harmless. She laughed with Ethan, she complimented our home, she stayed for dinner, then she started staying longer, laughing louder. Texting Ethan about family plans. I noticed the way she looked at him, lingering, curious, almost possessive. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, she was my sister. He was my husband. Betrayal felt impossible. Until the night it was. I had returned home earlier than expected from a work trip. My suitcase rolled quietly across the hardwood floor. The house felt warm, alive, too alive for someone who should have been alone. Then I heard voices upstairs. Ethan's voice, Madeline's laugh, soft, close, intimate. I walked toward our bedroom. The door was closed, and I listened. There were murmurs, a breathy giggle, a familiar tone that made my stomach drop. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My heart felt like it was cracking, not loudly, but slowly, like glass under pressure. I didn't open the door. Instead, I turned around, walked downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at nothing until dawn. By morning, I wasn't the same person anymore. Ethan confessed that day. Not with shame, but with justification. "It wasn't planned," he said. "Madeline understands me. She challenges me. We just connected." Madeline didn't even pretend to feel guilty. She looked at me like I was already a memory. "You're strong, Lauren," she said. "You'll bounce back. You always do." As if stealing my husband was a compliment to my resilience. Within weeks, Ethan filed for divorce. Within months, Madeline moved into the house I had decorated, cleaned, and called my sanctuary. My parents sided with her. "She's in love," my mother said gently. "You should be mature about this," my father added. And just like that, I lost my husband, my home, my sister, my place in my own family. I packed my clothes into boxes and moved into a small apartment with thin walls and no warmth. Every night felt like drowning. Every morning felt like survival. They thought they had destroyed me. What they didn't know, for 10 years, I had been hiding a secret, one that could change their lives forever. And as I sat alone in that silent apartment, I made a decision. I would not beg. I would not break. I would not disappear. If they wanted to write me out of their story, I would write my own. And one day, they would regret every single thing they had done to me. Cliffhanger, because the woman they thought they broke was already planning her revenge. The first year after my divorce felt like walking through a world that no longer belonged to me. I had lost my home, my marriage, my place in my family. The apartment I rented was small, beige walls, outdated appliances, a faint hum from the old refrigerator that never seemed to stop. At night, the silence felt louder than any argument ever had. Some evenings, I sat on the floor with a glass of water, staring at my phone, scrolling through photos of the life I used to have. Madeline is smiling in my kitchen. Ethan is standing beside me at family gatherings. My parents hugged both of us as if nothing had ever been wrong. Now Madeline posted pictures from my old living room, her arm around Ethan, captions about love and destiny. My parents liked every post. I felt erased. At work, I tried to act normally. I smiled. I answered emails. I attended meetings. But inside, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the center of my heart and left only echoes. There were nights I cried until my chest hurt. Mornings when I struggled to get out of bed. Moments when I wondered if I would ever feel whole again. But grief doesn't stay still. Slowly, it began to transform. Into awareness. To resolve. Into something darker but sharper. Anger, not the explosive kind, the controlled kind. The kind that sits quietly and waits. One evening, while organizing old documents, I found a folder buried at the back of a drawer. Inside were records from 10 years earlier, investment contracts, emails, business plans. And suddenly, I remembered. When I was in my early 20s, long before Ethan, long before my marriage, I had quietly invested a portion of my savings into a small tech startup. It had been risky. Private, something I never talked about, not even to my family. Back then, no one took my financial decisions seriously. "You're too cautious," my father used to say. "Madeline is the ambitious one," my mother would add, so I kept my ambition private. That small investment had grown over the years, slowly at first, then rapidly. While my family believed I lived an ordinary, modest life, I had been quietly building something much bigger. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was starting from zero. They were wrong. That realization changed everything. I stopped spending my energy on pain. I started channeling it into strategy. I took additional business courses. I attended networking events. I expanded my investments. I hired a financial advisor, someone who treated me like a serious, capable woman, not the quieter sister. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Meanwhile, Madeline and Ethan built their relationship on the ruins of my marriage. At first, they looked happy. Too happy. But cracks began to appear. Ethan struggled at work. Madeline spent money faster than he could earn it. Arguments became visible, passive-aggressive captions online, awkward public appearances, forced smiles. And then there was the house. My house. The one I had decorated, the one I had dreamed of, the one I had lost. They treated it like a trophy, proof that their betrayal had been worth it. I watched quietly, not with jealousy, with patience. Years passed, my investments multiplied, my career advanced, my confidence returned, stronger, steadier, sharper. The woman who once begged for emotional scraps had evolved into someone self-reliant, disciplined, and powerful. I stopped checking Madeline's social media, stopped waiting for apologies, stopped expecting fairness. Instead, I built a life that didn't revolve around them, until one day an opportunity arrived. A major corporate firm announced a merger, a company that Ethan desperately wanted to work for. What he didn't know was that I had recently become one of its silent investors. And when I saw his name appear on the applicant shortlist, I felt a strange sense of calm. Not excitement, not hatred, control. I realized something important in that moment. Revenge didn't have to be impulsive. It could be patient, strategic, elegant. If they had taken my home, my husband, and my family, then one day I would make them face the truth, not with screaming. Not with humiliation, but with undeniable proof that they had underestimated the wrong woman. That night, I opened my old folder again, the one holding a decade of quiet preparation. And for the first time since the betrayal, I smiled. Cliffhanger, because the next time Madeline and Ethan saw me, they wouldn't see the broken sister they abandoned. They would see the woman they never expected to rise. The first time Madeline and Ethan saw the new version of me, I could tell they weren't prepared. Years had passed since the divorce. In their minds, I was still the broken sister, the woman who had quietly disappeared, the ex-wife who had been left behind. They had no idea who I had become. The invitation arrived in their mailbox as a sleek black envelope, a formal corporate networking event, high-profile investors, executives, a guest list filled with names that carried weight. Ethan was excited. He had been trying to rebuild his career after several failed projects. Money had become a constant source of tension between him and Madeline. They needed an opportunity. Status. Stability, so they attended. They walked into the ballroom like a couple trying to prove they still belonged in a world that was slowly moving past them. Madeline wore confidence like armor. Ethan wore ambition like a mask. Then they saw me. I stood near the center of the room, calm, poised, dressed in a tailored blazer that fit like authority. I wasn't loud. I wasn't trying to be seen. I simply existed with quiet power. Madeline's smile froze. Ethan's expression shifted, confusion, disbelief, and something dangerously close to insecurity. They approached, trying to sound casual. "Lauren, wow," Madeline said, forcing warmth into her voice. "You look great." "You too," I replied politely with no trace of bitterness. Ethan cleared his throat. "We didn't know you'd be here." "I'm involved in the company," I said simply. They exchanged glances. Moments later, the event host stepped onto the stage. "We'd like to acknowledge one of our key investors," he announced. "Someone who has played a major role in our recent growth." He said my name, and the room turned toward me. For a second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Madeline's face drained of color. Ethan looked like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had never even considered the possibility that I could become this. Later that evening, Madeline cornered me near the balcony. "How long has this been going on?" she demanded, her voice trembling between shock and envy. "Longer than you think," I answered calmly. "You didn't tell anyone," she said. "No," I replied. "I didn't need to." For the first time in her life, Madeline looked uncertain, like the confident sister who had always overshadowed me, was realizing she no longer had control of the narrative. Ethan approached afterward, his tone suddenly respectful. "You've done really well," he said quietly. "I underestimated you." "I know," I replied. And for once, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. As the night went on, I watched them from a distance. Madeline clung to Ethan with subtle desperation. Ethan avoided meeting my eyes. Their relationship, once built on excitement and rebellion, now felt strained, burdened by comparison and regret. I didn't need to interfere. Their guilt did enough damage on its own. A few weeks later, my parents called. They had seen photos from the event, heard whispers, realized I was no longer the daughter they had dismissed. "You never told us you were doing so well," my mother said hesitantly. "You never asked," I replied gently. Their pride sounded forced. Their regret sounded real. But what mattered most wasn't their reaction. It was the power shift. The narrative had changed. I was no longer the victim of their betrayal. I was the woman who had survived it. Yet, through it all, I hadn't revealed my biggest secret, the one I had kept hidden for 10 years, the one that could truly dismantle the illusion Madeline and Ethan were still living in. And when I received a message from an old contact, someone who still had access to evidence from the early days of their affair, I knew the time was approaching, not to destroy them impulsively, but to reclaim what they had stolen. Cliffhanger, because soon I would reveal the truth they thought had been buried forever, and it would change everything. Title: My sister stole my husband, my house, and my life, but she never expected the secret I'd been hiding for 10 years. Part 4. The secret that turned the tables for years. I had carried the truth in silence. Not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of timing. Some secrets are not meant to be revealed in anger. Some are meant to be revealed when they can change the outcome. And the truth I had been hiding for 10 years was powerful enough to rewrite the story Madeline and Ethan had built. It started with a message from an old acquaintance, a former colleague of Ethan's, someone who had witnessed the early stages of their affair. "I kept the evidence," he wrote. "You might want it someday." I had never forgotten. Back when my marriage was collapsing, I had suspected their relationship had started long before they admitted it. But I never had proof, not enough to challenge them legally or publicly. Until now, the files arrived in a private email folder, screenshots of text messages, old emails. Photos time-stamped months before my divorce, proof that their relationship had begun while I was still married to Ethan. The betrayal had been longer, deeper, and more calculated than they had ever confessed. I didn't feel rage when I opened the folder. I felt clarity. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about justice. I took the evidence to a lawyer, a sharp, composed woman who listened carefully as I explained everything. "There may be legal grounds here," she said calmly, "especially regarding property and financial settlements. The house they had taken from me, the home I had poured love into emotionally, financially, physically. At the time of the divorce, I had been too emotionally shattered to fight. I had walked away just to survive. Now, I had the strength and the proof to fight back. Legal proceedings began quietly. No dramatic confrontations, no public accusations, just calm, methodical steps. Madeline and Ethan didn't realize what was happening until official documents arrived at their door. Ethan called me first. "Lauren, what is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "It's the truth," I replied evenly. "You're trying to take the house," he said. "I'm reclaiming what was taken under pretenses," I answered. Madeline called next, furious, shaken, defensive. "You're being petty," she snapped. "You're trying to punish us." "I'm not punishing you," I said quietly. "I'm correcting a lie." Behind her anger, I could hear fear, because for the first time, the power was no longer in her hands. Court proceedings took months. During that time, their marriage began to unravel completely. Trust between them, once built on secrecy, started collapsing under pressure. Ethan blamed Madeline for ruining his career prospects. Madeline blamed Ethan for dragging her into a scandal. They argued about money, about reputation, about regret. And in those arguments, the reality finally surfaced. Their relationship had been fueled by excitement, ego, and rebellion, not love. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, focused, grounded, prepared. When the final decision arrived, it felt surreal. The court ruled in my favor. I regained ownership of the house, the home they had treated like a trophy of their betrayal. But I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. The day Madeline moved out, she stood in the doorway, the same doorway I had once walked through in heartbreak. Her voice cracked. "I never thought it would end like this," she whispered. "It didn't have to begin the way it did," I replied softly. Ethan reached out later, apologizing. "I lost everything," he admitted. "You were the only one who ever truly cared about me." "I cared," I said, "but you chose betrayal." And for once, he had no defense. My parents finally acknowledged their mistake. "We should have protected you," my father said quietly. "We chose comfort over truth," my mother added. I didn't respond with anger. I responded with honesty. "You taught me what abandonment feels like," I said, "and I taught myself how to survive it." But even as karma unfolded and consequences settled, there was one final decision I had to make. Whether to forgive or to walk away forever. Cliffhanger, because the final chapter of this story wouldn't be about revenge, it would be about the kind of person I chose to become after it all. When everything finally settled, I expected to feel victorious. After all, I had reclaimed my home. I had exposed the truth. I had watched the people who betrayed me face consequences. But revenge didn't feel the way I imagined. It wasn't loud. It wasn't thrilling. It wasn't satisfying in the dramatic way people expect. Instead, it felt quiet, almost heavy. Standing alone in the house again, the same house I once lost, I walked through each room slowly. The walls still held memories, some painful, some warm, some bittersweet. This house had once been a symbol of betrayal. Now, it felt like a symbol of survival. I thought about Madeline, my sister, the girl I grew up protecting, admiring, and trusting. The woman who had stolen my husband, my home, and my sense of safety. She tried to reach out several times after losing the house. Her messages were different now, not arrogant, not defensive. "Just broken, I never meant to destroy you. I thought love justified everything. I didn't realize I was ruining my own life too." I didn't reply right away. I needed time to understand my own heart. I thought about Ethan, too. The man who had once promised loyalty, then chose betrayal. His apology came late, years too late. "I lost someone who truly loved me," he admitted in one message, "and I'll live with that regret. I didn't hate him anymore, but I didn't miss him either." My parents visited one afternoon, quieter than I remembered them. "We failed you," my mother said softly. "We let favoritism and comfort blind us," my father added. Their regret felt real. "But regret doesn't erase damage. I don't need perfection from you," I told them gently. "I need honesty and respect." They nodded. For the first time, I felt like the adult in the relationship, not the daughter begging for approval. And slowly, I realized something important. I had already won, not because I took revenge. Not because I exposed secrets. Not because I reclaimed property. I won because I survived. Because I rebuilt myself when no one stood beside me. Because I turned betrayal into discipline. Because I turned heartbreak into strength. Madeline eventually asked to meet. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, two sisters shaped by the same childhood, but broken by different choices. "I ruined our relationship," she said quietly, "and I don't expect forgiveness." I looked at her, really looked. Not the villain of my story, but at a flawed, insecure, regretful human being. "I won't pretend it didn't hurt," I said, "and I won't forget what happened." She nodded. "But I also won't let hate control the rest of my life," I added. "Forgiveness doesn't mean excusing you. It means freeing myself." Tears filled her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a woman choosing peace." Years later, when I look back on everything, the betrayal, the loneliness, the secret I protected for a decade, I don't feel bitterness. I feel clarity. I learned that family can hurt you deeper than strangers. That love built on lies eventually collapses. That karma doesn't always come fast, but it comes honestly. And that real revenge isn't destroying others. It's building a life they can never take from you. Today, I live calmly, independently, confidently, without needing validation from anyone who once doubted me. My sister stole my husband. She stole my house. She tried to steal my life. But in the end, she unknowingly gave me something more powerful: the strength to rise alone, the wisdom to let go, and the peace that comes from knowing I never became the person who hurt me. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is becoming untouchable.